Greetings, fellow men of culture. As always, I'm broadcasting live from the peak of Thundercock Mountain. 2016 was a pivotal year for Western pop culture. It was the beginning of the wider, more casual audience of movies, TV shows, and video games starting to notice some changes. There was a creamy flood of brain-dead, baffling decisions, forcing all sorts of ideological viewpoints into all media, even if the audience hates it. Like when plugging grandma's dirty old pussy with Play-Doh to prevent the flood of ejaculate, sometimes you get overtaken no matter how hard you push back. Speaking of ejaculate, I want to thank this video's sponsors, my channel members. I appreciate all of your support. If you like what I do on this channel, consider a membership and join us on Thundercock Mountain for an unlimited supply of Granny Squirt. In what seemed like no time, every movie was getting a remake with race-swapped characters, Dumbledore loved gobbling massive donkey dick, and every TV show had to have one of everything to check off an arbitrary list for inclusion's sake. The reason this all happened so fast was because this shift was in the works for years in advance. If we had gone with my plan of banning all millennials from learning how to read or write, they wouldn't be getting these screenplays and scripts written in the first place. That's coming from a millennial. I never learned to read or write. Look at me now. A massive wave of young millennial-age writers and executives are coming, and they're coming hard. Every workplace was slowly filled with people that were desperate to make themselves seem unique in the eyes of others. Not realizing the irony of everyone having the exact same mindset regarding all social issues actually makes them less unique. This rot festered and grew like the black mold in the pit of my wife's pussy, getting worse and worse until it repelled all gentlemen callers. My wheelhouse is video games, and the two central people that really pushed the worsening of character writing in the medium was the tag team champions of pretentious bitches, Anita Sarkeesian and Zoe Quinn. Saying or hearing those names again after all these years is like cracking open a vintage bottle of diarrhea, with subtle notes of corn and green moss. What started as people being angry at Nathan Grayson for trading positive game coverage in exchange for Zoe letting him use her as his personal cock sleeve, turned into a huge cultural movement where gamers were somehow positioned as the bad guys, while Zoe was framed as an innocent victim. From the mid-70s all the way to the 2010s, video games were perfectly fine. Once Nintendo got in on the gangbang, the industry had been growing every year. Arcades, home consoles, and new competitors getting into the industry brought gaming from a children's diversion to a full-on hobby, with room for all sorts of different games. Gameplay-first platformers, story-heavy JRPGs. Eventually we got full-on Hollywood blockbuster action games and never-ending multiplayer titles. Gaming hit the mainstream during the 7th generation and became the biggest entertainment industry in the world. Then, in one single day, the entire industry and everyone who played video games was some sort of misogynistic, homophobic villain. Every gamer hates women, they're racists, and if you've ever played Donkey Kong, you're now a bad person. Tens of millions of people just sitting there playing whatever game, jerking off to anime lesbians, was now a bad person just by sitting there. The only way to fix this very real, not completely made up problem is to give Anita Sarkeesian lots of money. This woman somehow took control of the entire industry for years. Her and her company convinced hundreds of different development studios that the only way their games could possibly be successful is if her and her team were there to go over every detail of the character design and writing, rip out every aspect of it that could make it provocative or interesting, and squirt it out on the market for customers to find it mediocre at best, incredibly cringeworthy at worst. Her name started appearing as a consultant on tons of different projects, and it just so happens that all of those projects ended up being insufferably and nonsensically inclusive, diverse, and low quality. It was amazing. Anita Sarkeesian was the most public figure in the movement to completely shitify the games industry. Her actions emboldened hundreds of others to push her exact ideology and make modern gaming into the joke it is today. Feminist frequency squirted, so Sweet Baby Inc. could chart. A completely made-up problem popped up out of nowhere, and a handful of activist companies were right there to sell the solution. The pendulum has swung back hard in the past few years. I wouldn't be able to say half the degenerate stuff that I do in these videos without either a ban or having to self-censor like crazy if things hadn't gotten a bit more normal. Well, I was surprised to see some brand new director's cut footage of the original final boss pop back up on the internet for the first time in years. A young gentleman by the name of Alex the Hatman Baldwin, otherwise known as the backshot bouncer of East Western New Rutherford, posted some footage of the kind of horse shit Anita was telling game developers in a private lecture that they, of course, paid for. This particular lecture was recorded in 2023, long after her and her friends pretty much had a stranglehold on mainstream gaming and the entire established gaming press. All these people were marching to her orders for years at this point.
There is always resistance to challenging the status quo. There's always resistance and backlash. So
she was the status quo at this point. There wasn't any counterculture happening here. All the mainstream media and huge game companies were all behind her in 2023, and they had been for years.
So I don't debate people. For years, these fucking assholes on the internet who like debate me, like I'll pay you 10 grand if you debate me, blah 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 blah, and I'm just like, no.
Having a public debate would have been disastrous for business. Any well-spoken person who is even the slightest bit knowledgeable about the subject matter would refute her points and make her look bad. Getting publicly embarrassed would reduce the number of developers lining up to have her queef under their eyelids.
When you're perpetuating the status quo, you can use 2-3 words to get your point across. When you're challenging the status quo, you have to unpack the status quo and then provide a vision for the future and the alternative vision, right? So you are immediately in a losing position, right? Like you can't win that. There's no way.
You did win. The entire industry pivoted to withhold your worldview to its detriment. You convinced companies that make video games that their target audience is no longer gamers, the people that buy video games. That's like telling Universal to market movies to people that hate movies.
All of the work that anybody does that's challenging the status quo to build a more progressive, more social justice world is immediately confronted at every turn constantly with that type of resistance.
As it should be. We've already seen what your world looks like, and it sucks. Every single word in a script needs to be macro-analyzed and double-checked by a dozen HR employees and a handful of lawyers, until what you get at the end of the process is just a blank page of white paper. Straight white mail paper.
And you also have to understand that people are going to find you when they're ready. So you're planting seeds, right? Like you're just like, if you share a little snippet here and there and somebody argues with you and whatever, and they come back 2 years later and they're like, oh, fuck, I know what you were talking about now. This happens to me all the time.
And then everyone clapped. I find this hard to believe. I could see people that were especially vitriolic during this time becoming more apologetic as time passes. Wishing real harm on someone for their ideas is a little much. Mockery is fair game. But I think the people who had some sort of epiphany that Anita was correct all along and needed to change their worldview are few and far between. There was a measurable change in game quality when Anita and her friends became more prevalent in the gaming industry, and we're only starting to recover from that now. Japan and Korea got tricked like a lot of Western devs did, and now they've gone back to just making good games again, because that's what their customers buy. Square Enix recently announced some major layoffs at the company and a plan to move most game development back to Japan. They tried what Sarkeesian and people like her convinced them was going to work, and it lost them millions. Big companies will pretend all day and night that they care about whatever social issue is the current thing, but when they start losing money, the ship corrects itself and the true intent of the company is revealed. You may be thinking this interview is several years old. Surely Anita has returned to her home deep beneath the waves, awaiting in slumber for the next time she needs to return to the surface to feed. Unfortunately, the entire reason she's back in the news is because her name appeared in the credits of a massively successful indie game. Slay the Spire 2 is the sequel to one of the most highly regarded indie titles ever made, Nurture the Basin. One of my personal all-time favorite indie games. Slay the Spire earned the respect of millions of gamers by offering complex deck-building gameplay that took hundreds of hours to fully master. The highly anticipated sequel took off immediately upon hitting Steam, hitting concurrent player numbers that put several AAA titles with way higher budget to shame. It wasn't until people saw Anita Sarkeesian's name pop up in the credits that the game started to see some problems. Exactly what role she played or her influence on the game is unknown at this time as far as I'm aware, but just her name associated with the game at all caused many players to get a sour taste in their gaping holes. Within hours of this becoming known, the recent reviews on Steam took a steep dump as the news spread. My knee-jerk reaction is this sucks. The game seems to be of pretty high quality despite being in early access. But it's hard to feel sympathy when I realize that there's no way the developers weren't aware of Sarkeesian's effect on game perception. Her name is poison to a game's reputation. I have no clue why they decided to hire her and give her money for anything. Everyone still hates her after all these years, and Slay the Spire 2 proves that. Regulars of the channel are aware that I advocate heavily for indie games, and playing older titles over buying whatever shiny new AAA game is squirting out. So it sucks to see Megacrit make such a dumb choice, and now they're seeing the consequences. Hopefully this serves as a beacon to all future developers of any size that associating with this woman in any way will heavily taint your reputation. Anita Sarkeesian caused so much damage to gaming for the last decade that her presence in the industry can't be allowed to persist. I'm not saying get personal or attack her friends or the developers that hire her. I'm saying continue to do what you're doing. Don't buy anything with her name in it. Any new comments she makes regarding the gaming industry should be met with apathy and mockery. Don't allow her to get a foothold in the industry ever again. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, I'd appreciate a like and subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next one.